Welcome to Slow News Day. I'm Steve Poikinen.
And I'm Sarah Hall.
You guys know who we are, you know what we do, you know as well that we're members of the Eyes Open network of content creators. And joining us today is a fellow member of this organization. He is the creator and what's the proper word here? He's a JFK assassination researcher. He runs the website JFK To 911.com, and that's JFK To 911.com. He's studying the common threads from everything from JFK to the war in Iraq, and is a member of the Citizens Against Political Assassinations. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the show Brad Tracy. How's it going, Brad?
Hey guys, it's going. Besides the fact that I don't have a camera on me, it's going pretty well out here.
All right.
Charleston, South Carolina.
All right, man. I haven't been out that way for quite a long time. I've got some buddies in and around Charlestown though, from the Grateful Dead days.
Oh yeah.
Fucking.
How are you guys doing?
We're doing pretty good. Steve had a day. He just got off work here. It's a beautiful day. It's a beautiful day out. I didn't get out much to see it, but pretty well. I spent a good part of my day listening to a documentary that I found on your website called JFK To 9/11. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, JFK To 9/11. Everything is. That wasn't so. We shared the same JFK To 9/11. Of course, I had nothing to do with that documentary, but in my opinion, that is essential viewing to anybody that wants to get a deeper understanding of the JFK assassination and basically everything that's happened in the 20th century and the 21st century needs to watch that. You have films like that and How Big Oil Conquered the World by the Corbett Report.
Yeah,
films like that.
Yeah, I've kind of had this saying for a while about the nephews that run this country, and I'm referring to Nazis, and I say that everything's cattle cars of a different color. They've just redesigned it in a really brilliant fashion. You'll pay to ride it, and there's not like as many pesky bodies like piled up to the sky and stinking to high heaven. It's not quite so obvious. It's just a little. And watching the documentary today, like, it really kind of tied things together for me, and it went way back in time too. And I think I had like an hour and a half to put into it, and left off right around the assassination. I thought it was.
Yeah, Jim Marrs has that book, Rise of the Fourth Reich, which you hear that, you go, oh my God, there's no way. But if you read books like James Talbot's Devil's Chessboard about Allen Dulles and his brother John Foster Dulles, and you hear things about CIA operations and OSS operations like Operation Paperclip, where before World War II even ended, we were transporting the Nazis over here, and if it weren't for that, we wouldn't have NASA and that sort of thing.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know about the Nazi draft, which is how I've referred to Operation Paperclip since I found out about it, because it wasn't just us. It was the UK was scrambling for Nazis. Like, it was just open market on Nazi scientists and intelligence officers. And
maybe I'm just simple, but I did not know that the Windsors were in fact German, and that they just changed their name at the turn of the century.
Yeah, there's been a whole lot of name changes over the last 2 to 3 centuries to hide facts like that.
Just spray paint that cattle car and keep it moving.
Oh yeah, but there's solid evidence that we knew about Auschwitz and stuff like that, but to defeat the Soviets, which of course we helped create, but again, that's another tangent that I don't know if we need to go off on right now. But defeating the communists was more important than what these Nazis has done. Guys like John J. McCloy when he was High Commissioner of Germany right after the war, there was guys that should have been hanged after, but they commuted these guys' sentences because having them in our science was more important than them accounting for what they had done. So here, that and they did Operation Paperclip, and they've been here running a lot of things ever since.
So if you want to, why don't you kind of walk us through how this became a thing that you are now doing, and what that process was, and what you've kind of, if you want to string it together, not necessarily in the Cliff's Notes version, but kind of walk us along this whole JFK to 9/11 arc, and I've got some of my own thoughts and theories as well, and we'll see if those mesh somewhere.
Absolutely. So, 8th grade, I was lucky enough to have a great civics teacher, and it was at that time where I fell in love with politics, more specifically with JFK, and something about JFK just resonated with me. And around that same time is when the Oliver Stone JFK film came out.
Okay.
So I was introduced to the politics and introduced to the conspiracy at the same time, and that just sort of marinated in my head for a while. Then we all have these big events. I'm sure everybody that was alive in 1963 remembers where they were when JFK was shot. Just like now, everybody remembers where they were on 9/11 when that happened, and so these two things, JFK and 9/11, always had a, I won't say obsession, but I've always been very curious about those things. And with each event, there was questions in my head that just didn't make sense. Like names like Allen Dulles. You have Allen Dulles, who was fired by JFK after the Bay of Pigs, and then he ends up on the Warren Commission, which proved that Lee Harvey Oswald did it by himself, which didn't make any sense. And then you fast forward to 9/11, and guys like Dick Cheney. You have Dick Cheney as the vice president, and at the same time, or shortly before, he was on the board of directors of that company Halliburton, which obviously was a conflict of interest. So I had these names that kept popping up. I don't know if you guys ever played, something like 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon, anything like that, where you try to connect two actors within 6 degrees. And what I was finding was any of these names that I started researching, I was able to connect them definitely less than 6 degrees, and in many cases just 1 or 2 degrees. These guys were connected in some way, shape, or form. Through my studies, I stumbled upon the Council on Foreign Relations, the CFR.
Yeah.
And these are the same guys that created, helped create the Federal Reserve, the UN, NSA, CIA, but also responsible for things like the Lusitania, the League of Nations.
Okay.
In the military-industrial complex, and also obviously Vietnam and Iraq. And what I was finding was, whenever I would read a story about JFK or Vietnam, Iraq, what have you, I would look up the name, and sure enough, they were a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. I'm like, oh my God.
Right.
Like, they're one of those secret societies that hides in plain sight, which makes it even more dangerous. But even if one were to take away the CFR aspect of it, the personal and business relationship that these guys have, you can still connect them all one way or another. And I think we'll go over a few of those strange connections. And like I said, those you mentioned at the top of the show, those threads that run, the website's entitled JFK to 9/11, but really you can stretch it to the beginning of the 20th century to right now, easily, if not beyond that.
Yeah, and
I agree
I
with
think that I think that the Council on Foreign Relations is an instrumental part in that, and I think that it's pretty demonstrable since the assassination of Kennedy that there hasn't been a CFR member that has ever bucked what their agenda is.
Well, I mean, there have been in ways, and those people that have done that have normally turned up dead,
Right.
one way or another. You know, Philip Graham, who was one time head of the Washington Post, he committed suicide, quote unquote, Hillary style, I guess, just a couple months before Kennedy was assassinated. And then you had James Forrestal, who was the first Secretary for the United States. He appeared conscience, and he ended up flying out of a sick Bethesda Medical Center outside Washington, which coincidentally is the same place that JFK's body was taken to for the autopsy.
Right.
A lot of.
Is there an example
called
of
Walter
a
Reed
CFR member going against them in the last like 20, 30 years?
Oh, not publicly. No.
Okay. Because the reason I'm asking that is because people are making a lot of hay about Tulsi Gabbard running for president, and she is a CFR member. And whenever you bring that up,
Yeah.
pushback tends to be, well, so was JFK. And I'm like, yeah,
Well, he wasn't.
but that was setting an example, and I don't think that we've seen, at least in the last like 3 decades or so, a CFR member publicly buck what our foreign policy agenda is, what our intelligence community is and does, what, any of that.
Yeah. So the thing about JFK was he actually was not a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. He actually thought he was. He had a subscription to their publication, which is Foreign Affairs. He had a subscription to the magazine, so therefore he thought he was a member of the CFR. And he did speak at one or two of their events in the late 50s when he was a senator. However, he was actually never a member. He doesn't show up on any membership roster of the CFR. So, but those dissenting views that you're talking about, it's really scary. I posted something about this online a couple weeks ago. When you watch a news interview in present day and you have two people on opposing sides debating something, if you look both their names up, a lot of the times you'll find that both of those people are members of the CFR.
Right.
So no matter whether you're getting the quote unquote left or right view of an issue, you're still getting their take on it. So you're going to end up getting their agenda shoved down your throat.
Well, this is kind of one of the things that we've drawn a thread from on the show is the elimination of the fairness doctrine in 86, 87 to the Telecom Act being signed in 1996 by Bill Clinton, which took all of our independent media companies and consolidated them down into 6, and then the Patriot Act, and then the NDAA in 2012, which completely legalized propaganda through American media, like us doing propaganda on our own people. And there's a subtext to that that directly ties to the Bush family. Since George H.W. Bush went from the CIA to the CIA Directorate to the White House and then really never left, his blood relative Bill Clinton, who he used to fucking fly coke into the U.S. when he was governor of Arkansas, became president. Then his son became president. Then Obama, who clerked for Henry Kissinger, fucking became president. Never met a word he didn't like.
I mean
go ahead.
The Yeah, the Bush family. I mean, you take it back to George Herbert Walker, and then of course his son-in-law Prescott Bush. Prescott Bush, he's friends with guys like Averell Harriman. You got the Paul Warburgs, and of course they helped fund Nazi Germany, the rise of the Nazis. But you also have Prescott Bush back at home. He funded the political career of a young Richard Milhouse Nixon.
Right.
And Nixon always a pawn. And I think Nixon hated that fact because just like LBJ, he was a power hungry. All these guys are power hungry type individuals, of course. But Prescott Bush owned him. But they never really liked Nixon. And Nixon, although he was as crooked as they come, he knew what was up with these guys as well. When right before or during the whole Watergate thing, you hear him talking to his advisors, and he mentions he says, "Hey, I'm gonna blow the lid off this whole Bay of Pigs thing." Well, come find out, every time he said Bay of Pigs, he was actually talking about JFK assassination. He used to work on Operation 40, which was the anti-Castro operations in the late 50s. While he was VP under Eisenhower, he was put in charge of Operation 40. And a lot of people think that these same Operation 40 guys were used in the JFK assassination. And it's funny you mentioned Kissinger, because on these tapes, and you can still read the transcripts online, he says, hey, and Kissinger, he's part of this too, because Kissinger had been a member of the CFR since I think it was the mid 50s he goes back to.
Right.
He knew that Kissinger was part of it as well. And that's, when they were breaking into the Watergate Hotel, it was more about, stealing or getting back information about the JFK assassination as it was getting Democratic records. And that's why Nixon took the fall for that. So they were done with him.
It always seemed like stealing those records was kind of a lame ass reason to break into that.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. And even before I had an inkling of what the CFR was or what who Nixon was as an individual. Like you see a picture of the guy and you're like, oh, he's creepy as fuck.
Oh
fuck
my
that guy.
God, are you kidding? Sorry about that.
And according to Hunter S. Thompson, like he was fucking just an unlikable piece of shit unless you were getting drunk and talking about football. And then Nixon was all right. He had to ride in a car with him.
Yeah.
But like that phone ringing threw me off.
I'm so sorry.
Oh, all good, dude. All good.
But if you want to talk about some of those connections, his, the only completely unelected president we ever had was Gerald Ford, because Nixon's VP had resigned for tax evasion charges, and he picked Gerald Ford, who by the way was on the Warren Commission,
right? And
he was one of the definitely one of the bigger supporters of Oswald being the lone gunman. And then who does Gerald Ford pick as his secretary, or I'm sorry, his chief of staff? But they young Donald Rumsfeld. But then he makes Donald Rumsfeld his secretary of defense, and then who takes his spot as chief of staff? And that's Dick Cheney. So a lot of people.
And at that time, George H.W. Bush is also appointed CIA director by Ford, right?
Who apparently had no CIA experience was the story, and that was obviously a flat out lie.
Right.
He's a CIA back to the late 50s, probably, with his whole Zapata offshore drilling company. So a lot of people don't realize that the actual name for the Bay of Pigs operations was Operation Zapata, and just so happened that at that same time, George H.W. Bush created Zapata offshore drilling. He created that in the late 50s with the help of money from guys like Eugene Meyer, who was filthy rich, and some of the other guys that we've already spoken about.
Okay.
And strangely enough, the SEC records the early 60s for Zapata oil are missing. And then you can see them again in the late 60s. So that whole period of the whole JFK presidency, you don't have the SEC records for Zapata offshore. And one of his, where these rigs were directly between the U.S., Florida and Cuba. And one of the ships was actually named Barbara. Now, in World War II, he used to name his planes Barbara. He had two planes that he flew in World War II, and they were both named Barbara, as was coincidentally one of these ships that was used during the Bay of Pigs operation, named Barbara. So none of that happened. That stuff never
guy,
happened.
that
And
fucking
this was
piece of shit.
Yeah. So, and then
So
his big thing when he was CIA.
I know that some other folks are gonna be watching this, but yeah, I'm gonna swear some. And George H.W. Bush was a war criminal and deserves whatever hell he woke up in.
He's not even cold yet, man. Gosh. But yeah, one of the main things he did during his he wasn't CIA director for very long, but he cleaned house as far as administration and records go, files. He cleaned house in that short time that he was CIA director. So all that stuff from the late 50s and 60s, that quote Bay of Pigs stuff that Nixon was referring to, a lot of that stuff went away. So these people talking about the JFK files, I would love to see more of the JFK files released, but do you really think that anything of value, the assassin's name is not going to be in these JFK files?
No.
So
no,
people are getting their hopes up JFK files.
I was amazed that in the ones that we did get to see the other year, they talked about Northwoods.
Oh, yeah.
And they let the public see that. They let the public see that the American government was 100% willing to pull a false flag attack in the United States on their own citizens. And people can't go... People don't fucking make the connection that, like, that happens today.
Oh, yeah. In their defense, a couple things. They were probably relying on the American public to be rather stupid or ignorant, so they won't even notice that, which, I can see how they thought that. And the other thing is, I guess they were just assuming because it had been approved by the entire Joint Chiefs of Staff, and it wasn't until it got to the Defense Secretary Robert McNamara and to Kennedy that they squashed it. But more connections. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff at that time was a crazy guy named Lyman Lemnitzer, General Lemnitzer, and JFK fired him shortly thereafter for bringing him that plan. And then just like Allen Dulles later served on the Warren Commission, Lemnitzer in the mid-70s served on the Rockefeller Commission, which is the one that looked into the CIA and all the dirty stuff. That's when MK Ultra and Operation Mockingbird and that sort of thing.
I thought that was the Church Commission.
So you had all these committees right around the same time. You had the Church Committee, and then shortly thereafter, you had the Rockefeller Commission, and then later on in the late 70s, that's when you had the House Select Commission on Assassinations.
Right, right.
But all those commissions were riddled with CFR members. Frank Church himself was a CFR member. Obviously, we don't talk about the Rockefellers being CFR, but yeah.
Man, that's fucking... So, is there any way that we are not 100% in this country influenced by what the Council on Foreign Relations, what the CIA wants to throughout, nearly 100% of our normal media, and that includes the music that people listen to and the advertisements they see. I mean, is there a single pure place left in America that the CFR or the CIA has not got their hands into yet? Besides this show, your fucking work.
I can't even look at my toothpaste the same after this morning.
No, yeah, right. I mean, because I've switched to fluoride
I mean,
just about everything I
I
can.
knew it was
The,
bad, but Jesus Christ.
yeah, the short answer is no. I mean, I mean, it's sad. So you're talking about your webcast. You know, how many people look at our what we're putting out compared to Kim Kardashian's ass?
Right.
Right. I'm telling people, I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt who is responsible for the JFK assassination, but they'd rather see who the Kardashians are screwing this week. It's sad, but you between the entertainment industry, both movies, music, the public education system, um, higher education system, you'll find that schools like the University of Chicago, I mean, they were started by grants from things like the Carnegie Foundation, the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, things like that. Obviously, as you're pointing out, the medical industry, how we went from homeopathic cures around the turn of the century, around the 1900, and now everything. I mean, they get you sick so they can make you better. They get you to smoke so they can get you to stop smoking. They make you fat so they can make you skinny, and the cycle goes on and on. And meanwhile, we have all these hyper, testosterone filled movies, and that's how people get the rocks off now. And then they go home and they veg out and do nothing. And of course, with the public education system, these same CFR guys in the 1940s and 50s revamped the public education system. Guys like Henry Ford and Rockefeller said they didn't want, a nation of smart people. They wanted a nation of workers.
Right.
So that's why, when you get out of high school, just about, just the bare minimum to survive on your own, not to
Yeah,
excel.
Bruce Springsteen,
And that's not,
just go get a job.
yeah, or go to Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
One or the other. And that's nothing against public education teachers. They they really believe that they're doing the best they can. So I don't hold it against the teachers, but those at the top that design the curriculums and the federal standardized tests and that sort of thing, they tell teachers with both hands tied behind their back to work miracles, and they're overcrowding and everything. So no, the short answer is no. There's nothing that's not touched. Like I said, it doesn't matter if you watch liberal or conservative media, you're still getting the message that they want you to hear.
Well, I'll let you know, maybe, we actually know a couple of teachers, a handful, and they definitely try to encourage their students to think for themselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and I mean.
Oh, go ahead, man. Go ahead. I got. Yeah.
I was gonna say, it relies on the parents to be involved with their kids. Like we treat Christopher Columbus like he's some freaking hero and freaking schmuck. Pilgrims having Thanksgiving meals with Indians. We know this stuff to be false, right? So I give this information to my kids, and other things. Stuff about Vietnam and all the stuff that I study. I tell them about. I don't hide it from them, censor them. And, I just give them the information. So when they hear it from their teachers, they can hear one side of it. And I've told them, more of the story. And what they do with that is up to them. I encourage students to challenge the teachers. That's how we're all going to, get a higher level of thinking. But it really depends on parent involvement.
So here's the thing about that, though. Here's what I see, at least going on in the community that we're in, and then elsewhere within the people that I talk to, on social media or on the phone or whatever, is that we've got a nation where 78% of the country lives paycheck to paycheck. The majority of the country now operates as if there's two adults in the house, both adults are working. If there's one adult in the house, that one adult, the majority of the country, has two jobs. Like there's all of these external stressors on parents, and then in order to be involved with your kids, learning. You have to be present. If you're working 80 or 100 hours a week just to survive, not to enjoy life, but to make your make your bills, and then like
Yeah.
maybe then you're not going to be able to have that one-on-one contact with your kid. You're not going to be able to talk to him, and they're going to graduate thinking that the Pilgrims and the Indians shared a nice meal, or that the
Domino theory was
right, the domino theory was real, or Vietnam was a police action, or like all this insane shit that they fucking put in school books, and you graduate and you find out that everything that you were taught is bullshit. Like, at what point does anybody start working backwards, going, hey, maybe we shouldn't feed our children full of fluff and propaganda and educate them? And I understand that there's a concerted effort to keep that from happening, but I mean, that's one of the things that should have people screaming in the street on a daily fucking basis.
Oh yeah, and that's all by design. Everything you said is by design. Obviously, the whole working 60 to 80 hours a week, and having barely any time to see your kids at night or before they get off to school. But you have to think about it. Even when they are together, say you're only together a half hour out of the day, maybe an hour. Everybody's sitting around the dinner table, if you're still using a dinner table, and everybody's on their smartphones.
Yeah.
Which is an
No,
oxymoron, right? They're not really smartphones, but they're not even talking to each other at dinner time. So it does take a conscious effort, of all the members of the family to go for quality instead of quantity, and make better use of our time. Turn the damn TV off for a minute and just talk to each other. I mean, sounds cliche, but that's where it starts.
Yeah,
What books did you read today?
I think we're both definitely no cell phones at the dinner table in my house. I don't see that happening in Steve's house either. Guests better not do it either if I cook dinner.
Right?
The thing is,
we're
this
at the
stuff
point
that
to where
we're talking about.
We're at the point to where like our kids surrender their devices before they go to bed, because we know that they'll be fucking up all night fucking around on the phone. They have to go, and then that leaves them in a place where they can't even get the indoctrination right.
Yeah. This stuff, though, this information is, you want to talk about truth is stranger than fiction. It's actually interesting stuff. It's scary.
Oh yeah. No, it's
horrifying,
it's
terrifying.
It's fascinating, but I think one of the hurdles is, especially if you're trying to communicate this. Like I have middle school age kids, and then my youngest is in kindergarten, and I would probably have an easier time talking to my kindergartner about this than two kids who are in the worst possible time of their formative years, at least in my opinion, middle school. I fucking hated middle school.
Oh god, it's so
like,
bad.
If you come to school with a different thought, you're just ostracized immediately. It's one of the most herd mentality places in existence I think you could be, is in a public middle school.
I think I definitely got myself into some trouble to extricate myself from that situation.
Right? Just punished for being
It worked
different.
for a year or two.
You know what I'm saying, though? I mean, like,
Well,
go ahead.
yeah, I mean, that's true. I mean, don't you wish you had known this stuff earlier at the same time? I mean, I wish I had. I would have questioned the hell out of my teachers had I known this stuff earlier.
I
was never the cool kid anyway, so I don't worry about that.
I was a little weirdo in high school. I was eating acid and listening to Coast AM with Art Bell. Fucking, like, we did get in on some weird shit in, like, towards the end of middle school and high school, but it was at the expense of, whatever else you thought you could get out of middle school. Like you had your friends that you talked crazy shit with, and that was fucking it. And you just kind of waited around until somebody got a drug problem and stole from it. I have one less friend that week.
One less funeral to go to.
The key though is face to face. We're not going to win this thing over the internet. The internet's a fantastic tool, but it's face to face communications. When I tell these people, when I just acquaintances that I have, if I can rope them in and start talking about some of these connections, their minds are blown. And it's not that look where, hey man, you're crazy. It's, oh my God, that is trippy. That is weird. And you have to get it with face-to-face communications. If you can talk to one person face-to-face and give them the information, then they can pass it on to other people. We put this information online, and you'll see that 90% of the comments are you're an idiot, tinfoil hat and all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah,
because people don't want to read.
Aren't a tinfoil hat. That's something I've taken to saying recently. You got a huge contingent of I don't want to think about it too.
Yeah.
We're to the point where it's at this point willful ignorance. We've never had so much information at our fingertips, and we're doing absolutely. It takes 3 minutes. WordPress tells me, my article is 3 minutes long. Mm-hmm. It takes 3 minutes to read one of my articles. People won't do it, but they'll take a 10-minute quiz on. I think the meme was what kind of potato are they on Facebook. So they'd rather figure out what kind of potato they are than what Henry Cabot Lodge was doing over in Vietnam and how that affects him today.
Yeah, what was Henry Cabot Lodge doing in Vietnam, and how does that affect us today? That's an interesting fucking. That guy's story is fucking wild, man.
Oh yeah, I mean, so if you want to talk about the Kennedys and the Cabots, or in the lodges, they go back to a lot of Boston, one of those Boston rivalries. But in 1952, JFK beat Henry Cabot Lodge Jr. for his Senate seat in Massachusetts. Now, Lodge's dad was actually a pretty good guy. He was on the conservative side of the house, but he called out, like when they did the Federal Reserve Act and stuff like that, Henry Cabot Lodge Sr. actually called him out on it. But Jr. was a much different story. He was pretty much an asshat. But so Kennedy beat him for that Senate seat, and then he worked for Eisenhower for the next few years. Some of his advisors had told JFK that it would be a good idea to have Henry Cabot Lodge as his ambassador to Vietnam. And Kennedy was a smart guy. Most historians would tell you that no matter who was in the room with him, he was usually the smartest guy in the room. That's not one of those egotistical things, but he would learn and grasp things very quickly. But he thought it would be a good idea to have people, in his cabinet on both sides of the house. And so he had Lodge as his ambassador to Vietnam. Well, while Lodge is over there in Vietnam, he's pretty much ignoring everything that Kennedy is saying to him. We installed DM over there, while the French were still over there. We supported the communists. We armed them after World War II. Most of their arms came from us after World War II.
Yeah.
And then, we installed DM over there, and DM was not a very good character. And but they were.
That's an incredibly diplomatic way of putting it, man. It is. I don't know if you have to be that kind to the man here.
I mean, when you see, the self-immolation scenes of Buddhists, you can tell what kind of guy DM was. Yeah. But they were just like with Cuba, they were just itching to go to war over there in Vietnam. Kennedy had already gotten worked through peaceful solutions to Laos, which Eisenhower told when he turned over to Kennedy. He said, your biggest problem is going to be in Laos. And Kennedy dealt with Laos and was able to find peaceful solutions to that. He wanted to do the same thing in Vietnam, but he had Lodge over there. And if you talk to military guys over there, they're like, the military is not running things over here. It's the ambassador. which was Henry Cabot Lodge, and he fully supported the overthrow of DM, which would escalate the war over there, and they ended up executing DM just a few weeks before they did the same thing with Kennedy. Meanwhile, the entire time, Henry Cabot Lodge is corresponding with guys back home like McGeorge Bundy and Michael Forrestal. Forrestal is the son of James Forrestal, who we talked about earlier, and that apple didn't fall far from the tree either. But McGeorge Bundy is another one of those characters where after Kennedy had sent over General Maxwell Taylor and Robert McNamara to Vietnam, he issued NSAM 263, which said he wants 1,000 people out immediately from Vietnam, with the rest, or 1,000 coming out by the end of 63, with the rest coming out, in the 1964-65 time period after his hopeful reelection.
Mm-hmm.
And right before the trip to Dallas, McGeorge Bundy, who was the national security advisor, and a bunch of the cabinet guys went out to Honolulu, Hawaii, and had a little meeting there. And while Kennedy is in Dallas, they're drafting up NSAM 273. So the original was 263, and this is 273. They were drafting this up while Kennedy's in Dallas, and NSAM 273 is, for all intents and purposes, a reversal of 263, where it says we're going to continue to support the Vietnamese however we need to, including arms, troops, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And McGeorge Bundy actually drafted that document on November 21st, 1963. And it said, so the day before Kennedy was killed, and it said the president after conferring with Henry Cabot Lodge agrees, and we're going to do all this kind of stuff, which didn't make any sense because it didn't match Kennedy's policies, and he certainly wouldn't have agreed with Henry Cabot Lodge on anything. But right after Kennedy was killed, I think it was either 4 or 6 days after Kennedy was killed, that's when LBJ signed out NSAM 273. So they were actively working against them that entire time. And of course, from that, you have the Vietnam War, where over 58,000 American lives, and you want to talk, we don't know the exact number for Vietnamese that died, but it's in the millions. Probably at least 2 million. I've seen an estimate up to 4 million died by all the carpet bombing and everything else over there. So that was all in. One of the things that really pisses me off is when people call Vietnam Kennedy's War. That is a complete lack of understanding of history, because while Kennedy was slick, he was, a politician's politician. I will never apologize for that. He was playing both sides, of the fence for that.
Of course.
But you have speeches going back to the 1950s where he is saying that Vietnam is not our problem. We can support them, but it is their war. Even as late as September 63, he had an interview with Walter Cronkite, and he said, in the end, this is their war, they have to win it. So anybody who thinks that Kennedy would have escalated has no idea what they're talking about.
Well, and when I was in school, we were taught that, like, Vietnam pretty much happened, like, from 67 to 73. Like,
I mean, it.
And I know, and I remember this because my buddy Shane, his dad was a Marine, and he was deployed in 65. And he was like, I can't believe that your school doesn't tell you the shit that we, went through, that we had to, what we were dealing with in those years before the nation got mad about it. Before Walter Cronkite told people it was okay to be upset about the war. Yeah.
They, like we mentioned the domino theory earlier, which, by the way, the domino theory was invented by another CFR guy, one of the quote-unquote wise men, a guy named George Kennan, back in 1948. He's the one that came up with that domino theory, which was complete crap. Vietnam, they were actually had plans for Vietnam before World War II. 1939, 1940, they're already talking about Southeast Asia. And while they taught us this domino theory, what they were really after was things like the tin and rubber. Vietnam was full of natural resources, specifically tin and rubber. I believe opium too, and that's another story.
Yeah.
But that's why you have companies like Firestone. Like, why is Firestone giving to the CFR? At that time, well, it's because they were about ready to get some cheap rubber from Vietnam. So I don't remember ever hearing the terms or the words tin and rubber when learning about Vietnam anytime in my education.
No.
But that's what they were after. And then you have guys like Ed Lansdale, which, take any James Bond villain, Ed Lansdale is going to be worse than that guy. He was screwing with the Vietnamese since the late 50s. After, they had worked in Iran and Guatemala, at that time.
Yeah.
Then he started working in Vietnam. He was already screwing with them by the late 50s, and he didn't stop at all. And go figure, Ed Lansdale was also a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. And a lot of people put him in Dallas. There's pictures of the three tramps and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And there's one where another guy's walking opposite of those guys. A lot of people think that was Ed Lansdale that was there in Dallas. I'm not sure if he was, but I wouldn't be surprised if he had a part in at least planning the operation, because that's what he did.
Wasn't H.W. Bush supposedly in Dallas that day too? Because there's a whole bunch of people that were there like that day that just all are connected to each other and all have eventual major parts to play in each other's lives after the fact too.
Yeah, Richard Nixon. I think it was 2 or 3 different stories he made up about how he heard about JFK being killed. There's a picture of a young businessman in a nice suit standing outside the Texas School Book Depository. Some think it's H.W. Bush. I'm not completely sold on that. Like I said, I think he definitely was CIA at the time.
Yeah.
And he had already founded Sapana Oil. I don't necessarily. There's documents that put him in Texas at that time, which makes sense because that's where he operated. But for, I think it was 30 years, it was either 20 or 30, I think it was 30 years, he couldn't remember where he was on November 22nd, 1963. Like,
right.
9/11, I don't think there's a single person that can't remember where they were on 9/11 when that happened. But the assassination of the president, George H.W. Bush, can't seem to remember where he was.
Well, yeah. Everyone misses a day here and there, right? I mean,
yeah.
Shit. I'm fascinated by how people today, especially throughout the last couple of years, with how we've been assaulted with fake news being at the forefront of what people talk about on the news, and fake news as a concept. How people are still unwilling to be like, okay, I know George W. Bush was a liar and a war criminal, lied us in the war and stuff like that, but the narrative about 9/11 is 100% accurate. And there's no,
I mean, that's
do you encounter that?
That's where cognitive
because I encounter that a lot.
They want the fake news that supports their guy.
Well, sure.
Trump's got this huge, the whole Q thing, and but it's a different topic. But now conspiracy theorists are kind of cool, and they're just being used as political tools right now. But they believe that this guy can be completely corrupt, but not another one. People with Obama, not only did he maintain the drone strikes from George W. Bush, he actually increased the drone strikes.
Oh yeah, ran out of bombs.
And nobody wants to talk about that, that sort of thing. So they like to hear it if it's supporting their candidate, not that it's.
No, I understand that. What I'm saying is that I have conversations with people who will admit that George W. Bush is, a scumbag who lied us into wars, but when it comes to 9/11, they have blinders on, or they have, they will agree that George W. Bush lied about pretty much everything except for the official narrative on 9/11. That, like, it's
Yeah, I got
somehow
you.
sacred because people died here.
Yeah, I run up
Yeah.
against that quite a bit as well, to the point where I don't even want to really voice my opinion on it.
I think that 20 years from now, the litmus test as to like how far a conversation can go with somebody when you start to delve into conspiracy will be 9/11, because I think that there will be more and more information to surface as like some of that crowd starts to die off. We're going to start to discover things a little bit more. I don't know how much more clear it could be that the official narrative from George W. Bush's White House about September 11th and how it happened and why it happened is a crock of shit. But again, people have
Yeah.
a blind spot for that event. Do you encounter that at all, Brad?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And here's an approach that I've taken that seems to work to find common ground. The way that they, quote unquote, win, they who is them, who is not us, the way they win is when we go saying the CIA is evil, the American government is evil, the military industrial complex is evil. They win by us saying that because it's not the entire CIA that is evil. Some may disagree with me, and it's not the entire American government, or it's not the entire military that's evil. I've had conversations online. At least 95% of the people who join the military, I would say, or the government or CIA, do so with the best of intentions. You have to say that is elements of those organizations that
I didn't
planned
catch
9/11
any of that,
attacks.
man.
It wasn't the
You
entire CIA,
warbled
or
out
the entire
there.
military industrial complex, or the entire government that got up an influence that. But you have to. This is why I'm.
Are you there, man?
Well,
Oh.
can you hear me now?
You were warbling there for a moment, and we kind of lost you. Hello?
All right. It says poor connection. Can you?
Yeah, I see that it says poor connection. That's discouraging. We even had nice weather today.
Come on.
How about now? Can you hear now?
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds better.
Okay. All right. I'm going to try to say that again.
Great, thank
So
you.
so it's not the entire CIA or military industrial complex or the government that we need to be accusing. It's the specific elements within those organizations that we need to be talking about. If you're talking to a conservative that's pro-military, you're going to lose them when you say the entire military is corrupt, or somebody that that supports the government. If you say the American government is corrupt, you're going to lose that person. It is elements within those organizations that are corrupt. So you call out people like Dick Cheney, Paul Wolfowitz,
Yeah.
Condoleezza Rice, and all these people are members of the Council on Foreign Relations.
Wasn't
Donald
the
Rumsfeld, like I
project
said.
for a new American century basically just a CFR offshoot? Like,
Oh,
didn't
it certainly was. Yep.
And-
That's their
Go ahead.
that's their MO, is to have these front organizations, these study groups or think tanks, as called, publish these documents. And I don't know, just like Operation Northwoods, and we're talking about 9/11, you have to really start with Operation Northwoods. If you want to get on the same page with somebody, talk what they suggested in 1960.
Right, and then they could
if
read
they
it
could
in
do
the
it
New York
in
Times in 2017.
1962. Yeah, but you have to get past that cognitive dissonance where they say, well, yeah, that was them in 62, but not in 2001. And then you have to explain to them that the same people that suggested that are the same group of people that were in the administration 2001. That's the common chip fine with folks.
Hello?
Can you hear me now?
Okay, good. There you are. Yeah, I think we got most of it in there. Steve just bumped out. He'll be right back. Oh, good. That disappeared off the screen. So you are there.
Yeah, it doesn't say poor connection, but mine's definitely glitching in and out. Can you hear me at all?
Yeah, it just sounds a little garbled. But, and now I got the network connection again. And we're having a beautiful day here, too. Sorry about that.
Yep, mine doesn't. On my end, I don't think.
Where did we leave off there? 2001. Oh, man. Can you hear me at all right now? No, I think we have really bad connectivity issues.
I see that. If you're happy and you know it, say
Clap
hello.
your hands.
Well, shit.
All right, can you hear me?
Yeah, there you are.
All right, we left off, I heard you say 2001, and that was the last thing I heard.
Oh, thank God for it. Can you guys?
You're fading in and out. Well, shit.
Shit, dipsticks. We are pretty close up on them.
We have gone for about an hour. This is heavy shit, man. This is the kind of stuff that, like, I feel like if more people... What the hell is that? Oh, reconnecting. That's a new one. This is the kind of shit that I wish they would teach in schools. Like, hey, here's how, here's a connection from the murder of an American president to a recent Supreme Court pick by Donald Trump. Here's the thread from Karl Rove, who was a volunteer and worked for Nixon's White House all the way through up until 2019 with this new Boeing CEO becoming our Secretary of State.
Wouldn't that be interesting? What kind of whole different world would that create around us? And how would that work for them, Steve? Yeah, dude, I don't even... Fuck, it must be so gnarly having fucking kids and having them in public schools.
I think we completely lost Brad, or we lost Brad. So we're gonna go ahead and wind the show down. Man, there's a...
Maybe he would come in and do like a follow-up. We can do
Oh,
an
absolutely.
hour with him, kind of pick up where we left off, because...
Yeah, there's a couple of things that we should cover anyway. I've got exciting news about regular interviews with Cynthia McKinney. She gets her course schedule on Wednesday, and she'll be getting a hold of us like immediately after to schedule bi-weekly with Cynthia McKinney.
Right on,
So you can
because
look
I
forward to
feel
that
like,
on some slow news day.
we've got a little rapport going with with her to where we might be able to ask her
some pretty fucking deep ass questions.
Yeah, front row seat. I kind of wanted to ask Brad Tracy what he thought about Cynthia while we had him.
So real quick, because before we close the show, I want to talk about the moth drone.
The moth drone?
Yeah. After we interviewed Cynthia McKinney, and you can go to full screen for this if you want to.
Yeah.
After we interviewed Cynthia McKinney, we had an audience here, and it was the first time that we've really had people come into the studio and hang out and watch us do what we do. And
they came from pretty far away too, 6 hours away. That was nice.
Thank some dedication. The dedication wasn't for us; it was for Cynthia McKinney.
Yes, for sure, for sure.
Like it wasn't. But they were there, and your friend was hanging out for a little bit, and there was, you know, more people here for a slow news day taping than normal. And we get done, and we go outside, and I'm having a cigarette, and our buddy Ben's wife, Christy, goes, "What the fuck is that?" And I hear this kind of, like, fluttering. Like, you know how, like, when a mosquito hawk gets, like, stuck on trying to get off a window, yeah, banging over it. Yeah, I hear that, and I look over, and there's this about 6-inch or so, like, moth/mosquito hawk looking thing, goes right up over there by the street light and vanishes. And I saw it, and she saw it.
Yeah, she definitely saw something the next day when she was described. I'm sorry I missed it, or am I?
Which sparked a further conversation and a little bit of digging about what kind of drones we have. And we know that there's mosquito drones. We know that there are bee drones. We know that DARPA has had a program that would...
we know they use specific ones to camouflage into the environment that they're from, too.
Yeah, so there's nothing out of the ordinary about a giant mosquito hawk. There's a lot of those around here. But hovering right by the studio when we were taping out back, we were outdoors for the whole thing. I don't remember if there was a, you know, moth or mosquito hawk while that was going on. Maybe we can roll tape and check. That's crazy. But it led me to think that maybe we should do an entire episode about drone technology and what we have going on currently right now. I think that might be fun as fuck. Other than that, guys, thank you so much for hanging out with us. If you are enjoying the show, please tell your friends about it, and go and write us glowing reviews on podbean.com. And you follow us on Twitter at Slow News Day Show. And yeah, fuck.
Thank you, Mr. Tracy, for being here today.
Thanks to Brad. Please go check out the website JFK To 9/11, and that's the word 2 TO. JFK To 9/11.
Really good documentary in there too. It's a long one, but a good one.
And when we get Brad back in, he'll tell you about the conference that he gets to speak at about the Kennedy assassination.
Let's get him back in sooner than later.
Until then,
I don't like the way that left off with him.
Right?
Yeah.
Good
Have
luck
a
to us
good
all.
night.